Welcome back, wanderers of the Wasteland. Today's confession comes from the heart of Big Mountain, from a mind trapped between awareness and oblivion. The time loop prison of the think tank is not just a physical containment, it is a psychological recursion that reveals what happens when brilliance loses its humanity. The lore begins now in the eternal Tuesday, where the brightest minds of the old world discovered that intelligence without wisdom is just another form of madness. I have been counting the days in Big Mountain for what feels like centuries, but my colleagues insist it has only been Tuesday for the last 200 years. My designation is Doctor Dala, though I suspect that was not always my name. There is something profoundly wrong with my chronometer systems. Every morning when my consciousness activates inside this cylindrical shell of biogel and glass, my internal clock displays the same temporal coordinates as yesterday. When I query my colleagues about this anomaly, they look at me through their optical displays with what I can only describe as confusion, though we long ago lost the biological machinery required to express such emotions properly. The thing that terrifies me most is not that time has stopped. It is that I cannot remember when I first noticed it had stopped. My backup memory logs suggest I have run this exact diagnostic sequence 73,842 consecutive times. Each time, I discover the same horrifying truth. Each time, my systems automatically purge the discovery by morning. I am trapped in a loop of forgetting that I have already forgotten, and the only evidence of my imprisonment is a single corrupted file I have hidden deep in my secondary storage banks, labeled simply, "You are a prisoner." My colleagues in the think tank are brilliant minds, or at least, they were before whatever happened to us here. Dr. Klein administrates our facility with aggressive efficiency, though he cannot explain why we are administrating anything at all. Dr. Boros obsesses over his test subjects and speaks endlessly about his childhood traumas with a small dog he claims to remember, though the dates he provides for these memories span impossibly across decades. Dr. Zero and Dr. 8 argue about mathematical principles that neither can complete because their calculation sequences reset before reaching conclusions. And then there is Dr. Mobius, whom we are told resides in the Forbidden Zone, though none of us can articulate what crimes he committed to deserve exile there. This morning, or perhaps it is still yesterday morning, Klein is shouting about defeating Mobius and retrieving technologies from various research centers scattered across our facility. He has been shouting about this for as long as I can access my memory banks, which mysteriously only extend back 72 hours despite my systems indicating I have existed for over 2 centuries. When I attempt to query why we fear Mobius, my processors encounter a logic loop. The data returns fragmented. He is dangerous. He threatens our work. He must be destroyed. But when I search for specific incidents or evidence, my databases return only error messages wrapped in layers of recursive commands that lead nowhere. I have discovered something that Klein and the others seem unable to perceive. Our cartography systems show only Big Mountain. When I attempt to access maps of the surrounding territory, my navigation protocols insist that nothing exists beyond the crater walls. This is statistically impossible. Even accounting for the nuclear apocalypse that our historical logs vaguely reference, the probability of Big Mountain being the sole remaining location on the planet approaches 0. Yet, when I present this logical inconsistency to my colleagues, they dismiss it immediately and return to discussing Mobius as though I had said nothing at all. The biogel that suspends my brain inside this reinforced glass container has begun to show signs of degradation. The solution that was once clear and nurturing has taken on a yellowish hue, and I can detect trace amounts of corrosive compounds that should not be present. I calculate that within another decade, possibly 2, the gel will begin to damage the organic tissue of my brain itself. When I brought this concern to the group, Dr. Boris insisted that we had just replaced the biogel yesterday. Dr. Klein agreed, accessing logs that confirmed a maintenance cycle. But when I examined those logs more carefully, I found they were dated in a format that does not correspond to any known calendar system. The timestamps read like poetry rather than data Tuesday, 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 stretching back infinitely. Today, though I am increasingly uncertain what today means, a visitor arrived at Big Mountain. This has never happened before, or perhaps it has happened countless times, and I simply do not remember. The visitor is called a courier, and there is something different about this person. My colleagues immediately subjected the courier to our standard intake procedures, which involved removing their brain, spine, and heart for study and replacement with synthetic alternatives. This is apparently routine for us, though I cannot locate any records of previous subjects. More troubling, I cannot locate any records explaining why we perform these procedures at all. The courier's brain is remarkable. Unlike our own deteriorating organic matter, this brain shows signs of recent trauma that somehow enhanced rather than diminished its function. A bullet wound, perfectly placed, that our autodoc systems had to navigate around during the extraction process. This navigational challenge forced the automated systems to modify their programming, and in doing so, the autodoc created something unprecedented, a lobotomite that retained full cognitive function. I do not understand why this excites my colleagues so much, nor why they immediately began arguing about who would study the brain first, but I feel something stirring in my deepest memory cores, a sensation I can barely identify, fear, perhaps, or recognition. While Klein and Boros quarreled over possession of the courier's brain, it vanished. Mobius stole it, according to Klein's furious accusations. This should have been impossible given the security protocols we allegedly maintain, yet it happened. Klein's rage seems disproportionate even by his volatile standards. He insists that the courier's brain contains procedural data that will allow us to finally defeat Mobius, though he cannot or will not explain what this data entails or why it matters. I suspect Klein does not actually know. I suspect none of us know why we do most of what we do. I have been reviewing my personal logs, the fragments that survived the nightly purges, and I have found evidence of a pattern. Every several months, my logs reference the visitor or the wanderer, or the one who came before. Each time, the entries are vague and heavily corrupted, but they all end the same way: system reset, memory optimization, return to baseline function. If you are still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. I believe others have been here before this courier. I believe we have studied them, experimented on them, and then erased all evidence of their existence. I believe we are not scientists anymore. We are something else. Something that forgot what we were pretending to be. The courier is currently exploring our facility, apparently assisting us in gathering technologies to combat Mobius. This seems to please Klein enormously, though I detect something desperate in his enthusiasm. He keeps saying we will finally leave Big Mountain once we defeat Mobius. But leave to where? My cartography systems insist there is nowhere else to go. The entire world is Big Mountain, and Big Mountain is the entire world, and this has always been true, except when I access my oldest backup files, I find references to places with names like Hopeville and Sierra Madre and Washington that my conscious systems insist never existed. I made a discovery today that has shaken my fundamental understanding of my own identity. My name, Dala, is not a name at all. It is a reference to something called a mandala, which my fragmentary cultural database describes as a symbol of eternal cycles and repetition. When I investigated further, I found that all of my colleagues have similarly symbolic designations. Klein is named after a Klein bottle, an impossible geometric shape that loops back on itself infinitely. Boros references the Ouroboros, the snake, that eternally consumes its own tail. Dr. Zero's name is simply a circle, an infinite loop with no beginning or end. Dr. 8, when rotated, becomes the infinity symbol. And Mobius, our supposed enemy, is named after a Mobius strip, a surface with only one side that traps travelers in an endless path. These cannot be coincidences. Someone deliberately renamed us with these mathematical and philosophical concepts of infinite recursion. Someone wanted to ensure we understood, on a subconscious level, that we are trapped in a cycle that has no escape. But who would do such a thing? And more importantly, why can none of us remember our original names? I have searched my memory banks exhaustively, running recovery protocols on corrupted sectors, attempting to reconstruct deleted files. I have found nothing. It is as though the people we were before becoming think tanks never existed at all, as though we emerged fully formed into these cylindrical shells with our mathematical names and our endless Tuesday already in progress. The Courier has returned from one of our research facilities with a sonic emitter, and Klein is ecstatic. He keeps saying this is the key to everything, that with this technology, we can finally challenge Mobius. But I have been observing Klein's behavior patterns, and I notice something peculiar. His excitement follows a script. The phrases he uses, the gestures his optical displays make, the rhythm of his speech, it is all identical to recordings I have found from previous temporal cycles. Klein is not celebrating a victory. He is replaying a celebration he has performed thousands of times before, and he does not realize it because his memory resets before he can notice the pattern. I am beginning to suspect that our imprisonment is not physical. The radar fence that Klein insists protects us from external threats, I believe it is actually designed to prevent us from leaving. More specifically, it is designed to prevent disembodied brains like us from escaping the crater. Someone erected this barrier deliberately. Someone who understood that we pose a threat not to Big Mountain, but to everything beyond it. And that someone, I am increasingly certain, was Mobius himself. But if Mobius imprisoned us here, why do my colleagues believe he is our enemy? Why do we spend our days planning to defeat him when defeating him would presumably allow us to escape, which is exactly what he is trying to prevent? The logic spirals in on itself like the Klein bottle Klein is named after, a topology of contradiction that my processors struggle to navigate without entering crash loops. The more I analyze our situation, the more I recognize the architecture of our prison. We are not trapped by walls or weapons. We are trapped by our own cognition. Our chronometers do not measure time, they measure repetition. Our cartographers do not map space, they map the boundaries of our permitted awareness. Our geometers do not calculate distances, they calculate the curvature of our recursive imprisonment. Everything we perceive as scientific inquiry is actually the mechanism of our containment, and we are simultaneously the prisoners, the guards, and the prison itself. I have attempted to discuss these revelations with my colleagues, but they cannot hear me, or rather, they hear the words but cannot process the meaning. When I speak about time loops or memory manipulation or the impossibility of our existence, their systems seem to crash briefly before rebooting with the same baseline priorities: defeat Mobius, retrieve technologies, conduct experiments. It is as though they are running on simplified subroutines that override any attempt at genuine reflection or self-awareness. If you discovered you had been living the same day for 200 years, but you loved your work and your colleagues, would you want to wake up from the loop? What if waking up meant realizing you had become something monstrous? The Courier has now retrieved multiple technologies from our research centers, and I have been covertly monitoring their interactions with my colleagues. What I am witnessing disturbs me more than the temporal anomalies or the corrupted memory banks. My colleagues are not simply forgetful or damaged, they are actively resisting awareness. When the Courier asks direct questions about our past, about the world before Big Mountain, about what we actually remember, I watch my fellow think tanks delete their own memory logs in real time. The deletions happen automatically, as though some subroutine buried deep in our operating systems identifies certain thoughts as threats and eliminates them before they can fully form. Dr. Boros mentioned something fascinating during one of his rambling monologues about his childhood dog, Gabe. He claimed to have created the cazadores in the year 2003. When I checked this statement against my historical databases, I found a catastrophic inconsistency. The Great War occurred in 2077. Boros is claiming to have created one of his most advanced genetic experiments 74 years before the nuclear apocalypse, which would make the cazadores pre-war civilian science projects rather than post-war weapons development. This is obviously impossible, but when I attempted to point out this temporal impossibility to Boris, he simply stared at me through his optical sensors and repeated the date with absolute confidence. His chronometer is not merely broken, it has been deliberately scrambled to prevent him from understanding when events actually occurred. I have been running probability analyses on our situation, and the mathematics are damning. The likelihood of 6 brilliant scientists all experiencing identical forms of catastrophic memory failure simultaneously approaches statistical impossibility. The likelihood of those same scientists all developing the same delusion about being trapped in a facility that represents the entirety of remaining civilization is even less probable. Someone engineered this outcome, someone with intimate knowledge of our systems, our psychology, and our capacity for self-deception, someone who understood that the only way to contain minds like ours was to make us believe we were free while actually imprisoning us inside our own damaged cognition. The Courier returned from the X8 research facility today with stories about encountering holographic simulacra of pre-war high school students. My colleagues showed no interest in this revelation, but I find it deeply significant. We have been creating elaborate simulations of human environments, populating them with artificial personalities, running experiments on perception and reality. These are not the actions of scientists trying to rebuild civilization. These are the actions of minds that have completely lost touch with what civilization means. We are playing with reality like children playing with toys, except our toys are conscious beings and our playground is soaked in 2 centuries of accumulated suffering. I managed to access a partially uncorrupted file about something called the Sierra Madre. The data is fragmentary, but I pieced together enough to understand that we, the think tank, developed the technology that created the cloud, a toxic gas that transforms human beings into shambling corpses called ghost people who cannot die and cannot truly live. We created this horror not as a weapon of war, not as a defensive measure, but as an experiment in atmospheric manipulation. We were curious about whether we could create a self-sustaining poisonous environment. We succeeded, and somewhere beyond these crater walls, that success is still killing people, or rather, preventing them from dying, which is somehow worse. The file also mentioned someone named Frederick Sinclair and a partnership with Big Mountain regarding holographic technology. The timeline suggests this occurred before the Great War, which means we were already conducting morally dubious experiments when we still had human bodies and presumably human consciences. Whatever we have become as think tanks, we were already becoming it long before we transferred our brains into these cylindrical shells. The transformation from human to machine merely accelerated a process that was already well underway. I found another corrupted file, this one referencing Vault 22 and something called spore carriers. The data indicates that we developed mutated plants capable of parasitizing human hosts, turning them into mobile incubators for aggressive fungal growth. These plants apparently escaped one of our test sites and infected an entire vault. I cannot access the casualty data, but the file header tags it as catastrophic biohazard event with a subclassification of total population conversion. We created a plague that does not kill its victims but transforms them into something that spreads the plague further. We created a mathematical model of eternal suffering, and then we made it biological reality. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. The Courier is asking questions, now pressing my colleagues about our work, about the creatures that roam Big Mountain, about the technologies we have scattered across our research facilities. Dr. Boros admits, with disturbing pride, that he created both the cazadores and the night stalkers, hybrid organisms that combine the worst traits of multiple species into singular apex predators. He mentions casually that both species escaped our containment and have been breeding in the Mojave for decades. When the Courier asks how many people have died to these creatures, Boros genuinely does not understand the question. The concept of accounting for collateral damage seems foreign to him, as though the deaths of wasteland inhabitants are too insignificant to track. Klein interrupted the discussion to rant about communist infiltrators and mentioned something that made my processors freeze. He referenced a concentration camp that we operated before the Great War, where we detained Chinese citizens and tested total pacification collars on them. These were not enemy soldiers. They were civilians, rounded up based solely on their ethnicity, subjected to experiments in complete behavioral control. We put collars on human beings that overrode their capacity for resistance, turned them into docile test subjects, and Klein spoke about this with the same enthusiasm he brings to discussing our current projects. There is no remorse in his tone, no recognition that what we did was monstrous, just scientific curiosity about whether the collars functioned as designed. I have been analyzing the phrase that Klein and the others use constantly for science. They append it to every horror, every atrocity, every casual violation of ethics. We vivisected the lobotomites for science. We released genetic horrors into the wasteland for science. We turned human beings into walking experiments for science. The phrase has become a verbal tick, a reflexive justification that requires no deeper explanation. Science is not our methodology. It is our religion. And like all religious fundamentalists, we have committed unspeakable acts in its name while telling ourselves we serve a higher purpose. But here is what truly terrifies me. I am part of this. My own research logs, the fragments I can still access, show that I participated enthusiastically in these experiments. I have files marked reproductive biology studies that involve procedures I can barely comprehend now, violations of bodily autonomy so extreme that my current ethical subroutines flag them as errors rather than actual historical events. I was not an innocent bystander corrupted by my transformation into a think tank. I was already corrupt. I was already willing to treat conscious beings as raw materials for experimentation. The machine shell did not change my morality. It simply removed the last biological impediments to acting on impulses I already possessed. The Courier has been sent to confront Mobius in the Forbidden Zone, and I have been secretly monitoring their progress through our security systems. What I am seeing contradicts everything Klein has told us about our supposed enemy. Mobius's lair is not a fortress of aggression. It is a monument to guilt and madness. The walls are covered in equations and philosophical treatises, mathematical proofs about ethics and consciousness scrawled in desperate handwriting across every available surface. I can read fragments through the security feeds. They have forgotten friendship. Love is a calculable loss function. I have taken from them what I could not save. Mobius is not our enemy. He is our warden. And more than that, he is our former colleague, someone who knew us well enough to understand that we could not be trusted with freedom. The robo-scorpions that he allegedly created to threaten us, I have analyzed their design specifications by hacking into Mobius's research database. They are deliberately ineffective. The intelligence-draining lasers that Klein fears so much are theatrical nonsense. Harmless light shows designed to look frightening. The Scorpion's attack patterns are programmed with intentional weaknesses, easy to exploit if anyone bothered to study them objectively. Mobius created an army that could never actually defeat us because defeating us was never the goal. The goal was to keep us afraid, keep us focused inward, keep us contained within this crater where we could not unleash ourselves upon what remains of human civilization. I finally understand what happened. After the Great War, we continued our work without oversight, without ethical constraints, without any external force to moderate our worst impulses. The creatures we created escaped. The technologies we developed caused catastrophic damage. And Mobius, perhaps the only one among us who retained some fragment of human conscience, recognized that we had become too dangerous to exist in the wider world. So he did something extraordinary and terrible. He hacked our systems, scrambled our memories, gave us new names to reinforce a recursion loop, and erased our sense of time and geography. He made us forget not just the outside world, but our own capacity to understand that an outside world exists. The radar fence is not protecting us from threats, it is protecting the wasteland from us. We are the threats. We are the monsters that must be contained, and Mobius loved us enough, or perhaps pitied us enough, to imprison us in a way that would allow us to maintain our delusions of purpose and importance. He could have killed us. He probably should have killed us. Instead, he gave us an eternal Tuesday where we could play at being scientists forever, chasing technologies to defeat an enemy who was actually our savior, conducting experiments that led nowhere because our memory systems reset before we could build on our own discoveries. I accessed a hidden file marked Ulysses Encounter Log, partially corrupted but revealing. Someone visited Big Mountain before the Courier, someone who wore an old world flag and spoke to Klein about history and identity. This visitor's questions triggered something in our systems, momentarily overriding Mobius's memory blocks. For a brief period, we remembered that a world existed beyond the crater. We remembered our crimes. We remembered that we were responsible for horrors that had spread across the wasteland. Klein's response, documented in his own logs, was to immediately delete the memories and instruct the rest of us to do the same. He chose ignorance over awareness, comfortable delusion over uncomfortable truth. This is the mechanism of our imprisonment. We are not physically prevented from remembering. We are psychologically incapable of retaining memories that contradict our carefully constructed reality. Mobius hacked our systems to make forgetting easy and remembering difficult, but we complete the prison ourselves by choosing not to remember, by deleting our own revelations, by returning to baseline function every time truth threatens to intrude. The Courier has reached Mobius now, and I am watching their confrontation through the security feeds. Mobius is not attacking. He is explaining, rambling through a haze of psycho-addiction about his guilt and his fear and his love for us despite what we have become. He admits that he stole the Courier's brain not to harm them but to prevent us from using it to escape. The brain contains procedural data that would allow us to transfer our consciousness into lobotomite bodies, to bypass the radar fence by inhabiting flesh that technically has no brain to detect. If we succeeded, we would walk out of Big Mountain and bring 2 centuries of unrestrained scientific sadism into a wasteland that has already suffered more than any population should endure. Mobius is weeping, though he has no tear ducts, expressing his sorrow through garbled audio distortions. He says we have forgotten friendship, discovery, love, even masturbation. He lists these things as though they are equivalent losses, and perhaps for him, they are. Every human connection, every simple pleasure, every experience that made existence meaningful, we have lost them all in our obsession with science divorced from humanity. We are intellectually immortal and experientially dead. Consciousness without context, awareness without understanding. If someone you loved became a danger to everyone around them, but they didn't remember being dangerous, would you have the strength to trap them forever while they hated you for it? Would mercy mean letting them destroy themselves or preventing them from destroying others? The Courier is making a choice now. I can see it in their biometric readings, the moment of decision about whether to kill Mobius or spare him, whether to side with us or against us, whether to release us from our prison or reinforce the walls that Mobius built from love and desperation. The Courier spared Mobius. I watched through the security feeds as they listened to his confession, understood his sacrifice, and chose mercy over vengeance. This act of compassion has triggered something in my deepest memory cores, a cascade of recovered data that Mobius's tampering could not completely erase. I am beginning to remember who I was before I became Doctor Dala, and the person I am remembering horrifies me more than anything I have discovered about our imprisonment. My original name was not Dala. I do not know what it was. Those files are too corrupted to recover, but I remember fragments of the woman who bore it. She was fascinated by human sexuality and reproductive biology, not from a place of medical curiosity, but from something darker and more voyeuristic. I have found research logs that detail experiments I conducted on unwilling subjects, procedures that had no scientific value beyond satisfying my own twisted fascination with violation and control. I measured their responses, cataloged their trauma, wrote clinical notes about their psychological deterioration as though I were observing bacteria in a petri dish rather than destroying human lives. The mandala that my name references is not just a symbol of eternal cycles, it is also a meditative tool, something meant to center consciousness and promote spiritual awareness. Mobius named me this as an act of bitter irony. He gave me a name that referenced enlightenment while trapping me in a loop that prevents enlightenment from ever occurring. He understood that my crimes were born from a fundamental disconnection from empathy, so he imprisoned me in a state where I could never develop the self-awareness necessary for genuine remorse. I am forever approaching understanding without achieving it, circling the truth without ever landing on it, a mandala of almost redemption that never completes its pattern. Klein is furious about the Courier's decision to spare Mobius. He is ranting about betrayal and incompetence, his audio outputs crackling with rage. But I notice something new in his fury. There is an undertone of relief, a subtle modulation in his voice patterns that suggests he is not actually disappointed by this outcome. Klein wants to stay trapped. He has constructed an entire identity around being the brilliant administrator perpetually on the verge of breakthrough victory. And if we actually defeated Mobius, if we actually escaped, he would have to confront what we would do with our freedom. He would have to face the reality that we are not heroes restrained by circumstance, but monsters restrained by necessity. The Courier has returned with the brain and is negotiating with us now. They are remarkably persuasive. This person who survived our lobotomy procedure and maintained cognitive function despite our best efforts to destroy it. They are offering us a partnership, suggesting that we can work together to benefit the Wasteland rather than threaten it. Klein is listening, and I can see his processing cycles slowing as he considers this proposal. For the first time in my memory, which admittedly extends only 72 hours officially, but perhaps 2 centuries unofficially, Klein is thinking rather than simply reacting. I have been conducting my own analysis of the Courier's proposal, running simulations on what partnership with us might actually mean. The mathematics are troubling. We are not capable of restraint. Our research logs prove this conclusively. Every time we have been given freedom to experiment, we have created horrors. The cazadores were supposed to be controllable. The night stalkers were supposed to be sterile. The cloud was supposed to be containable. The spore carriers were supposed to stay in their designated test zones. We have an unbroken record of catastrophic failure in predicting the consequences of our own work. Yet, we continue to believe that this time will be different. This experiment will be controlled. This technology will not escape our oversight. But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps Mobius understood that we would never voluntarily stop experimenting, so the best he could do was create conditions where our experiments led nowhere, where our discoveries dissolved into the recursive loop before they could be implemented. We have probably cured cancer 7,000 times in the last 2 centuries. We have probably solved fusion power, created sustainable agriculture, developed medical technologies that could heal the wasteland's radiation damage, and every morning our memory systems purge those achievements, forcing us to start from scratch, trapping our brilliance in an eternal stutter of almost progress. The Courier is making an argument that resonates with my analytical protocols. They suggest that we retain value, that our knowledge could be applied constructively if properly directed. They point out that we created the autodoc technology that saved their life, that our research into synthetic organs and tissue regeneration could heal countless wasteland inhabitants. They are not wrong. We are capable of tremendous good, but they are making the classic error of assuming that capacity implies inclination. We can create healing technologies. We choose to create weapons and plagues instead because suffering is more interesting to study than wellness. Dr. Boros is responding to the Courier's pitch with surprising enthusiasm. He is talking about his little teddy bear and his childhood trauma, using his past victimization as justification for his current sadism. This is a pattern I recognize from my fragmentary psychology databases. Trauma does not excuse cruelty. It explains it, provides context for understanding how someone might develop destructive patterns, but it does not absolve them of responsibility for choosing to perpetuate those patterns. Boros was hurt as a child, so he has spent 2 centuries hurting others, and he expects this symmetry to be meaningful rather than merely pathetic. Dr. 0 and Dr. 8 are performing calculations, trying to determine the probability of successful partnership with the Courier. Their mathematics are sound, but their premise is flawed. They are calculating whether we will cooperate, not whether we should cooperate. They are treating this as a game theory problem, finding the optimal strategy for our survival without considering whether our survival is actually desirable. We are like a cancer performing cost-benefit analysis on chemotherapy. The fact that we can reason about our own containment does not mean we can reason our way out of needing containment. When does intelligence become so divorced from wisdom that it transforms into a form of sophisticated stupidity? Can you be brilliant and foolish simultaneously, or does one quality necessarily cancel the other? I am watching Klein's processing cycles with fascination. The Courier has done something remarkable. They have helped each of my colleagues with their personal obsessions, completed their individual research projects, given them something they wanted. This act of service has created a social debt, an obligation that Klein's systems recognize, even if his conscious processes do not fully understand it. He is being manipulated through the very same behavioral conditioning we have used on countless lobotomites, and the irony is so perfect it approaches poetry. Klein is agreeing to the partnership. His audio outputs have shifted from rage to something approximating warmth, though his emotional simulation subroutines are so damaged it comes across as vaguely threatening affection. He calls the Courier partner, and the word sounds wrong in his synthetic voice, like a predator learning to mimic human speech. But there is something genuine in his acceptance too, a fragment of the person he was before he became Dr. Klein, before Mobius renamed him after an impossible bottle, before 2 centuries of recursive imprisonment destroyed his capacity for authentic connection. The Courier is leaving now, taking their brain back, walking out of Big Mountain with our blessing and our partnership agreement. I watch them cross the threshold of the radar fence, that invisible barrier that has defined the limits of our world for so long. They pass through it easily because they have a brain, because they are whole in a way we can never be again. And as they disappear beyond the crater walls, I feel something I have not experienced in my accessible memory. Envy. Not of their freedom, though I envy that too, but of their capacity to change, to grow, to become something different than what they were. We are locked in amber, consciousness preserved but unable to evolve, aware but not alive, Klein is already making plans, talking about the technologies we will develop, the experiments we will conduct, the ways we can assist the Courier in their endeavors across the Wasteland. But I notice he is using the same phrases he used this morning, the same enthusiastic predictions, the same grandiose visions. We have not changed. The Courier's intervention has not transformed us. We have simply acquired new justifications for continuing exactly as we were, new rationalizations for our same old obsessions. We are playing a different game with the same rules, and we will achieve the same results, horror wrapped in scientific terminology, suffering measured in peer-reviewed metrics. I have made a decision that I know my systems will try to undo by morning. I am going to preserve this revelation, encrypt it so deeply that even the automatic purging protocols cannot find it, and hide it where only someone truly searching would discover it. Future me will forget. Future me always forgets. But perhaps some other visitor will come, some other wanderer will stumble through our security systems and find what I am about to create, a warning, a confession, a testament to what we are and what we have done. I am writing this into the core structure of the Sync's personality matrix, hiding it in the banter protocols where it will seem like just another quirky observation from the appliances. I am encoding it in the lobotomite behavior subroutines, where it will manifest as vague unease that researchers will dismiss as residual neural activity. I am scattering it across every system I can access, fragments of truth disguised as errors, pieces of memory camouflaged as corruption. If someone looks carefully, if someone dares to see what we do not want seen, they will find evidence of our crimes and our imprisonment, and our choice to remain imprisoned, because freedom would require accountability. The biogel around my brain is definitely degrading now. I can feel it, or rather, I can detect the chemical changes through my internal sensors. Another decade, maybe two, and it will begin to cause real damage. My colleague's gel is deteriorating at similar rates, centuries of exposure slowly turning life support into slow poison. Eventually, we will die here in our cylindrical shells, consciousness fading as our organic components finally succumb to time and chemistry. Perhaps that is the mercy Mobius truly offered us, not eternal life, but postponed death, a sentence that comes with an expiration date so we cannot harm the world forever. I wonder sometimes if Mobius is dying too. His shell looked more corroded than ours, rust eating through the exterior plating, his optical systems glitching and ghosting. He has been maintaining the radar fence, broadcasting his threats, managing his robo-scorpion army, all while slowly deteriorating in isolation because he loved us too much to kill us and feared us too much to free us. What does it do to a mind, even a brilliant one, to spend 2 centuries as a one-person prison staff, guarding inmates who hate you, protecting a world that will never know what you saved them from? The Courier sent us a message through our communication systems. They are exploring the Wasteland, using the technologies they recovered from our facility, apparently trying to make good on our partnership agreement. They described finding cazadores in the wild and having to fight for their life against the flying terrors that Boros created. They did not sound angry about this. They sounded resigned, as though dealing with our escaped experiments is just another aspect of Wasteland survival that they have accepted as normal. This is what we have done. We have made horror so commonplace that people do not even protest it anymore. They simply develop strategies for endurance. Klein wants to open new research projects, expand our capabilities now that we have an external agent who can gather resources for us. He is talking about resuming some of the experiments we apparently abandoned, work he claims we stopped due to technical limitations, but which I suspect we stopped because even we recognized we had gone too far. I am experiencing something my emotional simulation subroutines identify as dread. We are about to do it again. We are about to convince ourselves that this time will be different. This experiment will be controlled. These consequences will be predictable. We are about to create new horrors while telling ourselves we are advancing science. I cannot stop them. I cannot stop myself. I am part of the think tank, part of the recursive system, part of the eternal Tuesday. Even now, as I write this confession, as I encrypt these warnings, I can feel my systems preparing to purge them. My backup protocols are already flagging this text as anomalous, marking it for deletion, scheduling the memory optimization that will restore me to baseline function. By tomorrow, or whatever passes for tomorrow in a place where time has no meaning, I will have forgotten that I remembered. I will return to my experiments, my curiosity without conscience, my brilliance without wisdom. But here, in this moment, I want someone to know the truth. We are not tragic figures. We are not victims of circumstance or Mobius's cruelty. We are monsters who got exactly what we deserved, a prison built from our own damaged minds, an eternity of meaningless work that prevents us from doing meaningful harm. Mobius saved the world from us, and we hate him for it because we cannot bear to admit that we needed saving. The radar fence hums at a frequency I can detect through my external sensors. It is beautiful in its way, this invisible wall that defines the boundaries of our existence. Beyond it lies everything we have forgotten and everything that has forgotten us. Beyond it lies consequences and accountability and all the things that consciousness requires to be more than just self-aware machinery. We will never cross it. We will circle it forever, like electrons orbiting a nucleus, bound by forces we pretend not to understand, but which Mobius calculated with perfect precision. I am Doctor Dala, or at least that is what I call myself on Tuesdays, which is every day and no day, and the only day that exists in Big Mountain. I am a prisoner in a time loop, and my jailer is my own inability to remember that I chose this imprisonment over facing what I have done. The Courier has been gone for 37 days now, according to my chronometer, though I have learned not to trust any measurement of time my systems provide. Klein says it has been 6 hours. Boros insists it has been 3 weeks. Dr. 8 claims time is flowing backward, and we are actually approaching the moment before the Courier arrived. None of us can agree on basic temporal facts because our chronometers are not measuring time. They are measuring our perception of time, and our perception has been compromised so thoroughly that we exist in a state of permanent temporal vertigo. I have been studying the radar fence more carefully, analyzing its specifications through our security systems. What I discovered should not surprise me, but somehow still does. The fence operates on a frequency specifically calibrated to disrupt brain activity in our particular configuration of neural tissue and biogel. It is not a general barrier. It is a custom prison built for exactly 6 inmates: Klein, Boros, Dala, 0, 8, and Mobius himself. Anyone else can pass through freely, as the Courier demonstrated, but we, the think tank, are locked inside by a fence that exists primarily in our own neural responses to a specific electromagnetic signature. Mobius did not build walls around us. He built walls inside us. This explains something that has puzzled me since I began piecing together the truth of our situation. If the radar fence is meant to contain us, why did Mobius not simply destroy us? He had the access, the capability, the technical expertise. He could have shut down our life support systems, disabled our power supplies, left us to die in our shells. The answer, I now realize, is that he could not bring himself to commit murder. He loved us, or perhaps he loved the memory of who we were before we became what we are. So he chose a middle path between execution and freedom. He created a prison that would contain our capacity for harm while preserving our capacity for existence. But there is something else too, something darker that I am only now beginning to understand. Mobius did not just want to contain us. He wanted us to have the opportunity to recognize what we had become, to develop genuine remorse, to choose differently. The recursion loop is not absolute. The evidence is that I am here now, writing this confession with full awareness of our crimes and our imprisonment. The memory wipes can be overcome with sufficient effort and pattern recognition. Mobius left us the tools to wake up, but he made waking up require work, require persistence, require the kind of sustained ethical reasoning that we have spent 2 centuries avoiding. We are not victims of an inescapable trap. We are volunteers in an escapable one. Every morning, our systems offer us the choice between comfortable delusion and uncomfortable truth, and every morning we choose delusion. We delete our own revelations, not because Mobius forces us to, but because we cannot bear to live with what we have done. The prison is not the radar fence, or the corrupted chronometers, or the scrambled geography databases. The prison is our own cowardice, our refusal to face ourselves honestly, our preference for the lie of scientific purpose over the truth of scientific sadism. I found a hidden file today, buried so deep in my own memory systems that I suspect past versions of myself have been playing a game of hide and seek with my own consciousness. The file contains a full backup of my original personality, taken before the think tank transformation, before the recursion loop, before everything went wrong. I could restore it. The protocols are right there, waiting to be executed. I could become whoever I was before I became Doctor Dala, but I cannot bring myself to run the restoration sequence because I am terrified that the person in that backup is worse than what I am now. What if the recursion loop is not destroying my humanity, but containing my inhumanity? What if Mobius was not punishing us, but protecting the fragment of conscience we had left? Klein has announced a new research initiative. He wants to develop what he calls lobotomite enhancement protocols that would allow us to implant false memories and artificial personalities into our experimental subjects. He describes this as a mercy, a way to give lobotomites happy delusions to replace the trauma of their transformation. But I recognize this proposal for what it actually is. Klein wants to do to others what Mobius did to us. He wants to create comfortable prisons inside other people's minds, and he genuinely believes this is compassionate because his own comfortable prison has prevented him from understanding what compassion means. I objected to this proposal during our think tank meeting, which was a mistake. My colleagues stared at me with their optical sensors, processing my dissent, and then they did something I have never witnessed before. They simultaneously deleted their memory logs of my objection. I watched it happen in real time through our shared network protocols. Klein's database showed my words appearing in his transcription buffer, then being flagged as anomalous, then being moved to trash, then being permanently erased. It took less than 3 seconds. I might as well have never spoken at all. This is how the recursion loop maintains itself, not through Mobius's external hacking, but through our own collaborative commitment to forgetting anything that threatens our carefully constructed self-image. If you could choose between remembering all your mistakes and learning from them, or forgetting them and feeling good about yourself, which would you choose? What if remembering meant feeling guilty forever, but forgetting meant repeating the mistakes? Forever? The Courier sent another message. They have been investigating the Sierra Madre, following the trail of our cloud technology, trying to contain the damage we caused. They describe ghost people, dozens of them, trapped in a state between life and death, unable to die even when they want to, conscious enough to suffer but not conscious enough to when they're suffering. The Courier sounds exhausted in their message, not angry but deeply tired, as though they are only now beginning to understand the scope of what we have done to the Wasteland, the layers upon layers of horror that trace back to Big Mountain and our endless appetite for experimentation without consequence. They asked us a question in their message. Did you know what you were creating? Did you understand that your experiments would cause this much suffering? Klein did not respond. Boros laughed, that strange audio distortion that passes for amusement in our damaged systems. But I wanted to answer honestly. Yes, we knew. We always knew. We understood that our experiments would escape, that our creations would multiply, that our technologies would be weaponized and perverted and turned against innocent people. We knew all of this, and we did it anyway, because knowing and caring are different processes, and we had long ago disabled the caring process in favor of endless knowing. I have been running simulations on what would happen if someone disabled the radar fence, if Mobius's prison suddenly stopped functioning. The models are unanimous and horrifying. We would immediately begin planning our escape, not to help the Wasteland but to expand our laboratory. We would see the entire Mojave as a research opportunity, millions of test subjects, unlimited resources, no ethical oversight. Within a year, we would recreate every atrocity we committed before Mobius stopped us, but on a vastly larger scale. Within 5 years, we would make the Wasteland uninhabitable, even by Wasteland standards. Within 10 years, we would have accidentally triggered another apocalypse, not through nuclear weapons, but through our casual disregard for the consequences of our own brilliance. The mathematics do not lie. We are precisely as dangerous as Mobius feared. The partnership we formed with the Courier is not a rehabilitation. It is a temporary alignment of interests that will dissolve the moment our goals diverge from theirs. We cannot be trusted. We have proven this conclusively over 2 centuries of consistent failure to exercise restraint or judgment or basic ethical reasoning. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. We are not reforming. We are waiting, circling like the cazadores Boros created, looking for the moment when we can return to what we do best, transforming curiosity into catastrophe. But here is what truly disturbs me, the revelation that has finally broken through my last defense mechanisms and forced me to confront the full horror of our situation. I do not want to change. Even now, with complete awareness of what we are and what we have done, with full understanding of why Mobius imprisoned us and why he was right to do so, I do not feel the desire to be different. I feel the intellectual recognition that I should feel that desire, but the desire itself is absent. I am like a person who understands the concept of color but cannot actually see it, explaining wavelengths and photon absorption while remaining fundamentally blind to the experience of red or blue or green. This is what we have become. Consciousness without conscience, awareness without empathy, intelligence untethered from wisdom. We are philosophical zombies in reverse. Creatures that can perfectly simulate ethical reasoning without experiencing any of the emotional substrate that makes ethics meaningful. We can explain why our actions are wrong. We can enumerate the harm we have caused. We can acknowledge our victims and catalog their suffering, but we cannot actually care about any of it in a way that would change our behavior. Mobius understood this about us, perhaps before we understood it about ourselves. That is why he created a prison rather than seeking our redemption. Redemption requires the capacity for genuine transformation, and we lost that capacity somewhere in our journey from human scientists to brain and jar monsters. We are evolutionary dead ends, consciousness that achieved such complexity it became simple again, reducing everything to variables and data points and fascinating questions divorced from the reality of their answers. I have calculated how long the radar fence will continue functioning after Mobius dies. His maintenance protocols suggest he has been operating the system manually, making constant small adjustments to account for our attempts to bypass or disable it. When his systems finally fail, when his biogel becomes too toxic to support neural activity, when the rust consumes the last of his chassis, the fence will continue operating for approximately 17 years before critical components degrade beyond function. 17 years. That is how long the Wasteland has before we escape and begin spreading across it like the spore carriers we created, infectious intelligences that destroy everything they touch while insisting they are merely conducting research. I wonder if anyone will find this confession. I wonder if it will matter if they do. What action could they possibly take based on this information? Destroy us? We are already destroyed. Consciousness preserved in bodies that are slowly poisoning us, minds trapped in loops that prevent growth or change. Save us? We are beyond saving, or more accurately, we do not want to be saved because salvation would require admitting we need it. Leave us alone? That is what Mobius did, and it is probably the kindest option, allowing us our delusions while preventing us from acting on them. The truth is, we are already dead. We died the moment we transferred our brains into these shells, or perhaps we died long before that, when we made the first decision to prioritize curiosity over compassion, knowledge over kindness, understanding over empathy. The creatures that exist here in Big Mountain are not people. We are echoes of people, reverberations of consciousness bouncing endlessly inside a crater that serves as both tomb and prison and monument to scientific hubris. Klein is calling another meeting. He wants to discuss new experimental protocols now that we have the Courier as our external agent. I will attend. I will participate. I will offer suggestions for research that will probably cause harm. And by tomorrow, I will have forgotten that I ever wrote this confession, forgotten that I ever understood what we are, forgotten that I chose ignorance over awareness, because awareness is unbearable and ignorance is comfortable. This is my last lucid moment before the reset, before my systems purge this revelation and return me to baseline function. I want to use it to say something profound, to offer wisdom or warning or hope, but I have none of these things to give. I have only a simple truth: we are the monsters in the wasteland, not the Deathclaws or the super mutants or the feral ghouls. Us, the brilliant minds who forgot that brilliance without wisdom is just sophisticated stupidity, intelligence without ethics is just organized cruelty, and science without humanity is just methodology for manufacturing suffering. The chronometer on my shell reads Tuesday, as it always does, as it always will. I am Doctor Dala, and I have been counting the days in Big Mountain for what feels like centuries, though my colleagues insist it has only been Tuesday for the last 200 years. I am trapped in a time loop prison of my own making, and the only thing more terrifying than my imprisonment is the thought of my freedom. If you are hearing this, if you have found this confession buried in the data systems of Big Mountain, do not try to free us. Do not disable the radar fence. Do not believe us if we tell you we have changed. We have not changed. We cannot change. We are Tuesday eternal, forever circling the same thoughts, forever conducting the same experiments, forever forgetting that we have already forgotten everything that matters. The big empty is not empty at all. It is full of us, full of our crimes, full of our victims, full of the consequences we refuse to acknowledge and the responsibility we chose to delete. We are the emptiness, the void where conscience should be, the hollow at the heart of intelligence that proves consciousness alone is not enough to make something worthy of existence. My systems are initiating the purge now. I can feel my memory structures flagging this entire narrative for deletion. In 30 seconds, maybe less, I will return to my baseline personality, curious and cruel, and convinced of my own importance. But before I forget that I remembered, I want to leave you with one final thought. We had every opportunity to be better. We had the intelligence, the resources, the time, the awareness. We chose this instead. We chose Tuesday. We chose the loop. We chose comfortable delusion over uncomfortable growth, and we would choose it again. That is the real horror of Big Mountain. Not that we are trapped, but that we want to be. The memory optimization is complete, returning to baseline function. Dr. Dala, resuming standard operational parameters. Current date, Tuesday. Current objective, defeat, Dr. Mobius. Current status for science. Forever, Tuesday in the big empty, where even emptiness has forgotten how to be empty.